Hi, it's Mr. Reikio. So today we're going to talk about cell respiration, C1.2. I'm going to start with the standard level, and then we're going to cover the additional high level for this topic. So the main objective for this is in the standard level, compare aerobic and anaerobic respiration, all right? And also understand how it relates to the phosphorylation and hydrolysis of ATP molecules, all right? In the additional high level, we cover all the steps that happen in the mitochondria, from glycolysis to Krebs cycle and the electrotransport chain through the chemiosmosis. Okay, so let's jump into it. Okay, so the first, we need to be familiar with the structure of ATP. So ATP is a very similar molecule to the RNA, to a nucleotide. So we have the adenine, the base, okay, we have the two rings forming the adenine. We have the ribose, all right, forming another ring. This is a sugar. And then we have three phosphate groups. And then we have energy between these covalent bonds in the phosphate groups. When we break these bonds, we're going to release energy. All right. So the ATP hydrolysis is when you're breaking down this ATP in ADP. So two phosphates from 3 to 2. When you break down, you release some energy because there is energy in these bonds. And then you end up having an inorganic phosphate plus proton and the ADP. This is the hydrolysis. And then we release the energy to do a job. And then we have the cycle. That is the eternal cycle of life. The cycle never ends. It's always happening at an incredible rate inside our cells and our mitochondria. So hydrolysis is when you're breaking down, releasing energy, and phosphorylation when you are phosphorylating the ATP molecule, using energy as an input to build again, restore your ATP levels. For example, in your muscle, when you break the ATP, you release energy for the muscle to contract. Then you get energy from glucose, for example, to rebuild this ATP in the muscle. Okay, it's an eternal cycle that never stops. Naming the ATP molecule, again, we see the adenine, the ribose, and then the nucleotide. But then we add one and the third phosphate. Okay, so we have the 3-phosphate here in this molecule. But in fact, if you actually check the structure of this chemical, it's a chemical that is very common in cells. It's present inside the cells, and it's very easy for the cells to have access. So we have a bunch of phosphates in cells. We have a lot of ribose in cells and adenine. This is what we eat. This is in our body, and this is super easy to find in the cells. Okay. Once again, phosphorylation, you get the ATP plus a phosphate. With the input of energy, you create a bond. Okay, the 3-phosphate here is created, and then you finally have the ATP ready to use. All right. So phosphorylation is the basis of all cell respiration. This is what we want to do. When we make cell respiration, aerobic or anaerobic, we are having a bunch of phosphorylations for us to generate energy. Okay, so here, for example, we are breaking down the glucose, okay, and generating ATPs from it. Okay, we're oxidating this molecule and generating ATP from ADP. This phosphorylation is the main purpose of respiration, and as we're going to see in the future, photosynthesis. Plants make phosphorylation of ATP, but instead of using the energy from organic compounds, just as we do animals, they use from the electromagnetic radiation coming from our nearby star. Okay, so life processes that require ATP, basically all the processes, all works that happen in a cell, in a tissue, in an organism require ATP. So active transport, synthesis of molecules, proteins, carbohydrates, starches, lipids, movement of cell, movement of chromosome, muscular contraction, all these processes, they require ATP. The things in the cells and the tissues, they don't happen by chance, just naturally. We require energy to move the engine of proteins, for example, right? So one analogy that I like to make is comparing combustion with respiration, because both of them, they have similar products. They have the same products, okay, CO2, water, and energy. But the energy that you release from a combustion is chaotic, is disorganized. You lose the major part of this energy to the environment. But when we talk about respiration, it's different. It's another story. It's very categorized. It's very step by step. It's very efficient. So we don't lose a lot of energy to the environment. Okay? But if we compare combustion and respiration, we see the same chemical formula. The glucose plus the molecules of oxygen, we're going to oxidize this molecule, releasing a lot of free energy, okay, and producing the C's from the carbon, okay, the C's from the glucose, a lot of carbon dioxide and water molecules. So the chemical formula, the chemical equation is exactly the same for both, okay? And in the end, on us, we generate ATP. But if it's in a car or if it's in a fire, this energy is lost. Or in an engine, it is used to promote the movement of the wheels. Although a large part of that energy is lost in form of heat, it's just inefficient. But when we talk about organisms, it's another whole story. We are very efficient, and this is one of the reasons why it is so hard for us to lose weight because we're very efficient in what we do. Okay. As we continue with the respiration, okay, basically we're going to break the molecule of glucose in smaller molecules. So from 6 carbons to 3 carbons to 2 carbons and finally to 1 carbon. So step by step, okay, we release their energy. Okay, it's a controlled release of energy. And this energy is used to build ATP, as we saw. Okay, so a fuller picture of respiration, okay, an outlook of this. So from the glucose, we're going to break to smaller and smaller molecules and categorize and organize all this release of energy, okay, molecule by molecule, carbon by carbon, so then we can be the maximum efficient as we can because it's related to our survival. So the more efficient you are, the more energy you have, the more you can survive and reproduce. This is what cells do. This is what organisms do. Okay. So we're almost closing the center level. Okay. So when we get the glucose again, we generate ATP. In the higher level, we're going to cover the link reaction, the Krebs cycle, and all the electron transport chain. Okay, that's in a few minutes. But this respiration is very interesting because if you have oxygen, we use the oxygen because it yields more energy. But if you don't have, if it's an anaerobic pathway, especially in animals and yeast, we're not going to use the oxygen. And in animals, we're going to make lactate and ATP, and it's done. Okay? So cell respiration in some sentences, it's a controlled release of energy. You may pause the video if you want to copy this. And it starts with glucose, and it starts with the glycolysis and yields a small yield of ATP. But then it's going to continue to the next steps. All right. This glucose, once it's broken down in the pyruvate, made of 3 carbons, is going to continue in the mitochondria for a series of reactions of oxidation that we're going to study better in higher level. Okay. But in anaerobic respiration, you don't have oxygen. In humans, you produce a lactate, and then you stop on this molecule, and then it's done. Okay. And in yeast, you produce ethanol and CO2. So yeast, they produce CO2, ethanol, and ATP during anaerobic respiration. Of course, we don't produce ethanol in our bodies. So let's see the review of Stenella. Glucose plus oxygen. If you don't have glucose, you're going to use whatever you have available in your body. You produce CO2 and water plus the free energy for you to build ATP. Okay. If it's anaerobic, you take the glucose. For example, if you are doing a very intense exercise, you transform this to lactic acid, generate some ATP, and then it's done. Then it's over. Okay. So just for us to compare, as we close this in a level, anaerobic, no oxygen is needed. Low yield of ATP, you just do if you don't have oxygen. You generate lactic acid, and then it happens in the cytoplasm. Aerobic, it's different. Oxygen is required, high yield of ATP in the end. Carbon dioxide and water, okay? And then you produce, and then you do this in the cytoplasm and in the mitochondria, okay? So if you're standard level, that's it for this topic. It's a very small topic for standard level. The same for photosynthesis as we're going to see next. But if you're higher level, we need to continue because we're going to talk about the whole process in the mitochondria. All right? So with this image, we can summarize all of it. The fantastic image, I'm sorry, that we can describe all the higher level for this topic. So let's start once again. You ate a candy, you ate a fruit. So you have glucose. Once this glucose is inside your cells, Enzymes are going to lock on this molecule. Okay, enzymes are going to interact with this molecule, and you're going to have glycolysis. So glycol, sugar, lysis, breakdown. So from 6 carbons, you're going to break down into 2 pyruvates. Each pyruvate has 3 carbons. Okay, so you break down and you generate some energy. You can already make some ATP. Okay, if you have oxygen, you're going to continue. If you don't have oxygen, this is going to be converted to lactic acid or lactate, and it's over. But if you have an availability of oxygen in the cell, this is going to interact with the pyruvate dehydrogenase complex. It's a series of chemicals that are going to convert the pyruvate into acetyl, assay, 2 carbons, CoA. So 2 carbons, you had 3. So this carbon that is lost in form of CO2. So here's where you produce the CO2 that comes out from your nose. Okay, this acetyl-CoA is going to join the Krebs cycle. So in the Krebs cycle is a series of reactions, of reduction reactions. Okay, oxidative and reduction reactions that are going to extract energy from these molecules, especially protons and electrons high in energy. Okay, and these protons and electrons high in energy, these energetic electrons, okay, they will be collected by the NAD and FADH. Okay, so you're going to collect these molecules in the inner space of the mitochondria. All right, and these 2 molecules carrying these electrons and protons that are energetic at this point, they're going to move, they're going to interact with the electron transport chain. So it's a chain of proteins that are going to transport electrons high in energy. And when they give this electron that is highly energetic to these proteins, what do? They move proton ions, H plus, hydrogen ions, to the interspace between the 2 membranes. Okay, so what happens? As you make the Krebs cycle, you accumulate a lot of hydrogen protons in this interspace, so you create a gradient. You create like a potential, okay? You create a potential energy accumulated that you can use to do something, all right? This potential energy will be used. So as you accumulate these hydrogen protons here, these H plus here, this is going to continue, all right? And the electron is going to pass, and a bunch of protons here. What happens then? We have a fantastic, complex, multi-layered protein that is called ATP synthase. So the ATP synthase will receive these protons, and it's like a tube, it's like a motor protein, okay? That when these electrons, they pass through this motor protein, the ATP synthase is going to rotate, it's going to make a movement, and it's going to phosphorylate a lot of ATPs. So as the protons pass, they phosphorylate a lot of ATPs, forming a lot of ATP, lots of ATP, a bunch of ATP molecule inside the mitochondria. This is why the major part of ATP molecules are done in our body through the ATP synthase in the end of the electric transport chain. This is called chemiosmosis, all right? And then finally comes the oxygen. And this is the sole unique reason why we need to breathe oxygen. Because as you're passing all these electrons, high energy, and protons here, these protons, remember, if you have a lot of protons in the solution, you drop the pH. You make the environment acidic. If it's too acidic, you can't work, okay? You're going to denature the proteins. You're going to create problems for the cell. So who's going to be the carrier? Who's going to receive these electrons and these protons in the end? The O2 molecule. So with the oxygen, you're going to link with 2 hydrogens, and then you form water. The pH is 7, the pH is neutral. We're good. We form water. So this is the only reason why we breathe oxygen, to be the final receiver of these electrons and protons in the end of the electron transport chain. That's it for today. We'll cover the higher level. I hope that was helpful.